Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
2014. Police officer. I am fresh out of the police academy. I just started to work at a station on the edge of town in the capital city of a former East Bloc country, naive greenhorn.exe. It's the new year and I patrol the streets with my partner. I hate this guy, he is right about everything. Never uses police lights and is an all-around typical burnout coward. He's also thin as a piece of paper, so we called him Short Round on the station. We get a call about a fire in one of the concrete tower blockhouses in our district. The caller sees smoke and flames from a window. It's few hundred meters from where we are. The operation officer calls us to respond and we slowly get there without police lights, as usual with Short Round. In the distance, I see the special order unit. 8 people driving in a police van around town with supposedly better training and equipment. Something like a SWAT unit, but they have to patrol like us. We got there at the same time because they used the police lights and we didn't. Run up the stairs, it's on 7th floor. Smell the smoke but don't see any flames. Neighbors point me to a door. Ring the doorbell hard while banging on the door, no response. Decide to kick it open. Short Round gets on the 7th floor and just stands by the window. Wait for the firefighters. They should be here any minute. I don't reply. Get a few steps back and try to kick down the door with a stop kick. Instant pain.mp4. Unlike in the movies, the door didn't even react, as if it was made from steel. Meanwhile, the 8 police officers from the special order unit get there. Get the hell out of the way. They have a battering ram. That is basically a piece of heavy as hell pipe with a square shape of steel and handles welded to it. They ram the thing into the lock area 20 or so times. Nothing. The material around the lock gets destroyed, yeah, but the door itself doesn't move at all. We all look at each other. Meanwhile, the firefighters get on the scene. By now, there are about 20 people on this floor. They get a special crowbar and ram it in between the door and door frame. They do this like 10 times and pull each time. Still nothing. What the hell, man? They get a hydraulic machine they use to get people from totaled cars. With that machine, they crack the door open. Pop.mp3. As if they opened an old crypt that was unopened for 1,000 years, the flat sucks up air from the hall inside. Outside comes the heat. Firefighters get inside and go around for a while. Then they go outside. We don't need to put out any fire, but there is a dead guy in there. What? They work for a while and we let them work. When they look finished, I go inside to check out what happened inside. The flat looks not that bad. Then I turned left into the living room. This room is completely black, edges melted here and there, but mostly intact. In the middle of the room, there is the guy. He is sitting in an armchair facing the TV in the corner of the room. He is black in some places, but mostly his skin looks like a melted candle. Some places of his skin are completely smooth and almost white. The smell is that of badly burnt meat. Hold the urge to vomit somehow. Get out of the room and check out other rooms. There is nothing usual. Then I check the main door. On each edge of the door there is a square quadrangle with 4 holes in it the size of a thumb. There is an additional lock which turns 4 bars on each edge of the door to lock it. 2 down into the floor and 2 upwards into the door frame. I never seen this many locks before in my life, but we were in a ghetto after all. The head firefighter tells us that the guy probably had a smoke since the fire started in front of him. Fell asleep or something. The cigarette started a fire. The smoke strangled the man, then burnt the body in the flat for a while. Then physics worked, and since the fire didn't have any oxygen because every window and door was closed, it just went out itself. The firefighters didn't use a single liter of water, which was luck for the neighbors under the guy. The firefighters are finished and leave, as does the special order unit. We wait for 2 hours for criminalistics to come down. They check it out, it's just an accident, so they leave. It fell into our hand to investigate. The guy was actually an old man without any relatives. The door was smashed up and we couldn't close it and lock it, so we needed someone to take it. Wife, son, brother, it didn't matter to us. We managed to dig up a stepson who told us to fuck off, so we had to guard the flat until someone took it or repaired the door. We meant me in this case, of course. I was new. Short Round being the fucker, he has left me there to guard it without us taking turns. I close the door as much as I can because I don't want to be inside and wait. Stand guard for 2 hours. The undertakers come. They lift the old man off the armchair and the body is burned to the armchair. As they lift him up, this rips up his backside and some of his insides spill out on the armchair. Burnt smell spills out again. I almost vomited. The dead know only one thing: it is better to be alive. They take him away. Now guard the door for hours. The only thing I have on me is my equipment, my watch, lighter and cigarettes, and old push-button phone. Sit down on the stairs with a view of the flat and keep guard. Get bored and check inside the flat. A normal everyday flat on the right side from the door is completely untouched by the fire. The middle side is melted a little, and the living room is the worst. Check around. Normal furniture, closed windows with open blinds on them. Go outside of the flat and sit on the stairs. It is around midnight now. Hear a low noise from inside the flat. Yeah, right. .jpg, ignore it. I checked the flat like 3 times before and there was nothing in there. Another hour passed and I get sleepy. Hear the noise again. Something like a low rustle of things. Go inside the flat to check it out. Shine a flashlight around. Check the burnt out living room. Nothing. Start to turn around and leave when the light rests on the blinds. They move once, only a little. Let the eye of the flashlight rest on the blinds for a while. Nothing, 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 nothing. Now they move and rustle around a little. Nothing. What? It is virtually impossible for the blinds to move. The windows were closed and there was no draft. Get to the blinds and window and open the window wide for a while. As oxygen gets inside, I can breathe a little easier. Close the window. Check other rooms and find nothing. Sit on the stairs outside, wait for hours again and hear nothing from inside. Forget about the noise and get angry for being stuck here guarding the door again. In the morning, ask the landlord for some tools, hammer specifically. Ram the hammer to one of the square quadrangles a few times to get it in the normal position and manage to lock it. End of shift. Take a shower and go to sleep.
Not paranormal, just messed up. I grew up in an Eastern European shithole. I was about 8 years old, in the middle of the harshest winter experienced recently. Blizzard and sleet outside. I was watching TV with Grandma. Suddenly hear a blood-curdling cry from outside the apartment block. Everyone is spooked. Ex-Securitate Grandpa grabs a flashlight and aluminum bat and goes outside to check it out. I ran to the balcony to see him in the courtyard. And then, I see him. A guy splayed on the icy ground, head cracked open, and blood pooling all around him. Grandfather finally arrives at the courtyard, yells at me to go back inside. I stand there stupefied as he calls emergency services. The police determined that he was probably a burglar looking to break into some of the top-floor apartments. He slipped due to the ice and fell 15 stories head first. The blood pool stayed there for the rest of the winter because the police and the hospital didn't give a damn. And our Greek Orthodox neighbors were too superstitious to touch it.
2020. It's beginning of May. I am still a cop on the streets of the capital city in Slavic country, East European. The plague did not hit hard yet at this point, but our country still got real totalitarian regime-style regulations. The masks, the curfew, the shops closing, etc. I am a police officer, so I am the necessary tool for the implementation of the regulations. While we were the imperial soldiers rounding up the innocent with the guilty, our commanding officers and politicians were messiahs, the real saviors of the poor. They went to battle facing death with their chin held high, calm as you please. One order from them and us mortals on the front line would move like pawns across a chessboard to our grisly fates. Whatever man.mp4, at least I got a job in today's economy. The day is December 5th, 2020, and I remember this exactly because my stepfather died on this exact day a month ago because of the plague. He had Parkinson's. Get to the station after a 2-week leave of absence, and I'm still a little shaken up, but don't let it show. I am stationed with a guy straight from the police academy. Turns out he was in the army before and is a pretty okay guy. It's 10 minutes into the shift and we get called to some remote forest area where some guy can't get in touch with his friend. We get there and are in an area where you can get to with a car. About 2 kilometers inside the forest area. We walk this forest path for a while. Don't know if we are getting to him, get the feeling we are. There is a fork in the road and some guy stands at the fork, cross between a hobo and normal guy. You called? Yeah, it's my friend, hasn't seen him for a month, so I decided to check him out and well, he's dead. He takes a sip out of a plastic beer bottle he has on him. This guy is actually pretty shaken up but decides to lead us to the dead guy anyway. We live together in the forest, but I moved out a few months ago. Hobos again. We go a while off path in the forest, then he stops going and points into the forest. We could smell the guy some good 100 meters from where he was. Sorry I waited here already and saw it. Gulp.wav, seen some dead bodies before, but this had to be the second worse. The guy was inside the tent, obviously. There were bugs everywhere. I really don't want to, but start to open the tent. Bugs fly out, close the tent. We guard the perimeter and call criminalistics. As usual, we waited for some 2 hours for these guys to get there. Then we waited for the coroner. The coroner is actually a cute girl about my age. Sometimes the job chooses you, I guess. The coroner needs to get the guy out of the tent. Minute of silence.mp3. It would probably be easier to cut the tent off him, I say. Everyone agrees and we start to cut off the tent. First the stench, then bugs fly out. The guy is rotten and some places are already black with rot. Still somehow in one piece and not bloated, but nature has been reclaiming the man for a while. The coroner examines the guy quite thoughtful, turns him around, gags a few times, but does a good job. No external causes of death, cause of death unknown. Estimated time of death. She starts to look around and there are some packages of spread food open around. According to the look of the body in these packages, I would say a month ago, around December 4th, 2020. What are the odds.x? Stand there white as a sheet the rest of the time. I have to wait there for another 2 hours until the undertaker comes. Still makes me think sometimes it could be a coincidence, but still, why that same exact date? That meant he died the same day as my stepfather. If she was guessing anyway, why that same exact number?
Be me. 10 or 11 years old at that time. Live in a post-Soviet Eastern European country. The town is littered with abandoned industrial and railway infrastructure. Hang around it with a couple of my friends. Suddenly, one of them picks up a small bone from between the tracks. We quickly get carried by our imagination and decide to conduct an investigation. Gather there next day with paper bags, a shoebox in which we would store evidence and other similar things. Follow the tracks leading towards an abandoned train station. Decide to make a small detour to check a nearby structure. It was a patch of land surrounded by a 2 or so meters tall concrete wall with an old switchgear in the entrance. We were small enough to slip past the weirdly placed switchgear and enter the enclosed space. It was filled with tall grass, wild bushes, and growing trees. Nothing interesting. Suddenly, one of us notices a few trash bags in the furthest corner from the entrance. They were filled with bones. We grab 1 or 2 of them and start running away. We quickly reach the station, put the bones inside the shoebox, which we then hide in some hole below the station. We get away from the tracks and don't really talk much about our findings. A few days later, me and one of my friends who was there gather enough courage to return both the bags and the shoebox are gone. It's not paranormal or anything. I suspect poachers. I bet some random drinking teenagers found that shoebox and got even more scared than we did.
Not really spooky, but strange, somehow bordering the lines of human sanity, I think. To preface, I work in the police force in a small EU East Bloc country, the Hive. 2018, I am a 29-year-old male. February, the capital of the East Bloc country. Edge of town, not the outskirts. Known to be a big ghetto of gypsies back from 2001 when flood destroyed their natural habitat downtown. Patrol the streets in a car with partner. 2 a.m. empty streets. Kinda boring, really no action, and I remember getting sleepy, just about ready to get back for a break. Suddenly get a direct call on the radio from the station inspector of the night. Yep, we're listening. Get back to the station, there's a weird guy here. Inspector is at the station alone at night, so sometimes people come at 2 a.m. to report their car getting jacked, etc. Usually these people have problems, either in the head, alcohol, drugs, etc. Got it. I turn on the police lights and double time it back to the station to help the inspector. Get to the station, open the main doors, and it's dark inside. Only light I remember in the waiting room, where people wait to get their turn, is light from the vending machine. The guy sits there. White thin guy, old clothes, bald spot on his head, and his look is kinda out of there. He scratches his neck from time to time. Warning bells start ringing in my head. The guy looks at me not saying anything, and I don't say anything either. Shake head and go to the inside room to the inspector. What's up with that guy? Yeah. Inspector shrugs. What does he want? Dunno, you ask him. I just let him in, but he's fishy, so I leave this one to you. Inspectors are usually just the kinds of clerk white-collar cops who just handle reports on the station and relay info to the outside patrols, etc. They also work 24-hour shifts, so this guy just doesn't have the temper to deal with some nut job. Go to the guy with my partner. What's the problem? He scratches behind his neck and stands up. He's really short, no danger in the regard of fighting him, but still get really bad vibes from him. I got bugs in my apartment, he says. So? Call the exterminator to get rid of them. You really go to a police station at 2 a.m. to report this? Well, I need you to take a look. Seemed like a waste of time to me, and my partner shook head at me, but I just got this weird feeling to check it with him. He clearly wasn't right in the head, and something could be up in his flat. All right, we'll take a look. We go with him to our car and seat him in the back seat with my partner beside him. Go to the address, go to the apartment. He unlocks the door and waits. Get a flashlight and open the door. The flat is old style, as if from the 50s. Commie country that time. Stale, murky air, but nothing weird. Turn on lights in the hallway and get left to what looks like a bedroom. Shine flashlight on what looks like a bed, jumping an instant movement of a black tide of what looks like millions of bugs on the bed. Take 3 steps out of the room in terror, but have to check it anyway. Could be dead body or something. Turn on the lights. The bugs look like bed bugs and scatter inside of a bed as the lights turn on. No stench of a dead body though. And the room is unkept. Not filthy, just unkempt. Dust on everything, an overflowing garbage bin with more bugs crawling out. The guy is behind me and scratches his neck. See? Of course I see. Check the room for foul play, find nothing, just bugs everywhere. Check other rooms and surprisingly find another bedroom that looks fine, unused though. Anyway, nothing for the police. Call an exterminator or something, I say as we prepare to get out. Or use the other bedroom. Can't use that one. Mother died there a few weeks back. So you use the bug-infested one instead. He scratches his neck. Nothing for the police here, have a nice day. We get out and report to the inspector, then resume our patrol of the streets. 4 a.m. we drive past the metro station. Bugman stands there outside of the station, nobody around. He watches our car drive by slowly. Get to the station again and check the car. Find a few bed bugs inside where he sat. Get the car professionally cleaned.
On a stroll through a park near where I live. Around dusk, early fall. Stop for a second. Decide to sit down on a bench. Immediately, I started feeling weirdly dizzy after I sat down. Breathe in and out slowly to collect myself. Air starts smelling very metallic for some reason. Get a taste in my mouth. The best way I can describe it is the aftertaste of cheap coffee. I stand up again, and I rub my eyes a little. When I reopen my eyes, everything is very different. Notably, the trees in the park had changed. Originally, I think they were aspens or birches. I'm not 100% sure, but now they looked like pine trees. I looked around, and I noticed in general the nearby architecture had changed too. It went from standard brownstone shit to very brutalist, almost Soviet. I stumble out of the park, going back the way I came, or mostly, the path had changed a lot. I get out onto the street, and I immediately ask an old woman who was walking by what time it was, and more importantly, where I was. She looked at me confused and spoke something in Russian that I didn't understand at all. I thought she must have been a foreigner, and I walked off again. I found another guy in a suit that looked weirdly dusty. His skin was kind of pale too. Asked him the time, he glared at me and hissed at me, like a snake. I was absolutely bewildered by this, and thought I must just be having some kind of episode. I walked home, or where my apartment would have been. In its place was this little coffee shop that looked very, very familiar. I open the doors and step in. Immediately, I don't feel dizzy anymore, and the air smells normal, and I don't taste anything either. People are having chats all around me in the coffee shop, all in English. I stop and walk back out. Everything's back to normal. A few months later, a Russian family moves in the apartment below me.
Hey X, I'm going to tell you a story my grandfather told me about a week ago. I live in a small, 125,000 people city in Poland called Bloc. In 1976, after our economy broke down, There were 3 main protests, one of them in Bloc. Communist government wanted to punish the organizers and send riot police and militias to find them. My grandfather was back then a militias officer, and after these protests he had to find a man called Stanisław Kluczynski, who was one of the leaders of the rebellion. That is all you need to know now what my grandfather told me. They followed Kluczynski outside of the town into the small village Podolszyce, now it's part of Bloc, where his father's house is. My grandfather and his people set up an observation camp on a hill near the house and started waiting to see if he called for someone or something like that. After 10 minutes, Stanisław Kluczynski walked into the library room and he covered all the windows. At that moment, my grandfather decided to walk in and arrest him because it was taking too much time, and Kluczynski didn't want to communicate with any other organizers. When they were near front doors, they heard loud bang like grenade explosion and saw pure light emanating from inside the house. After they entered, they saw that all the furniture, paintings, etc. were burned. My grandfather walked into the library room to see that all the windows were broken. He saw the shape of a man untouched by burning on the wall of the library. The body was nowhere to be found. In the air, they feel the smell of ozone, and after the storm. When called to the report, the case was taken over by the ministry, and they were forbidden to speak about it ever again. They cleared Kluczynski from the official report. My grandfather said that he did not tell this to anyone, even after the Soviet Union fell apart. Feel free to discuss and speculate. I'm curious as hell to find out what happened there, but the lack of any official data makes it a difficult task.
I'm from Poland myself, and I remember a story of my grandma getting a visit from a ball lightning. You know, how they say they move somewhat purposefully. The one in question entered through an open window and strolled through corridors really slow till it somehow traveled to the barn and set the hay on fire. It kind of begs the question about the direct path of the lightning, and why was the window open in the stormy weather? Maybe it just appeared within the house. I heard this story a while ago. I only remember the purposeful stroll towards the barn being a thing. The funny thing is that for old people, mostly in villages, unnatural things like that are pretty normal, and they don't think about it much.
I think we make reality by the way we believe it is. Some things can only be perceived if you don't actively believe they are impossible. Then, ball lightning was reported to appear and act weird all over the world, including just spontaneously springing into existence within passenger plane cabins.
My stepfather, who is from Finland, saw ball lightning as a kid coming through the window and just slowly hovering around the kitchen and exiting the roof after some time. My opinion is that these phenomena are not lightning, but something like the brown mountain lights, maybe the air ionized by a thunderstorm, makes them visible and glow in our range of visible light.
Actually, some more Polish spooks. My grandma is an orphan. She lost her mother and her father married a woman named Angela. She was remembered by my grandmother and my mother as an extraordinarily good and pious person. After she died, she was reportedly seen many times over my baby mother's bed looking at her. Also, my granddad used to scare me with many folklore boogeymen, including Dziady, which would traditionally translate into ancestors or forefathers. I was a child with some really vivid imagination, and left alone at home, I would imagine all sorts of those bodies rampaging all over the flat as I just barricaded myself in a room under the table. Dziady were those black-clad, blue-skinned men with familiar yet vicious faces and elephantine almost ears. It came as a shock to me when 12 years later in a literature class I opened my textbook on a page regarding folklore spirits to see Dziady described and depicted as what? Blue-skinned men in black clothes with big ears.
I love cryptid shit myself, so I was pretty excited when I recently found out that my late grandfather had an encounter with one when he and my father lived in the Soviet Union. Granddad, an electrical engineer, gets called to a town near the shores of the Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal is known for, among other things, being fed by 330 rivers but emptying into only one, having an incredible ecosystem of thousands of species, half of which are only found there, being the deepest lake in the world, being the biggest lake in the world by surface area, and being the oldest lake in the world, as well as being the center of all manners of legends and creepy shit. So my grandfather arrives by the time it's getting dark, so the client insists that he stay the night in the Gostinitsa, but not before inviting him for supper. Over the meager meal, they discuss details of the problem and possible solutions. As the sky darkens, the client makes an odd remark that sounds out of place coming from the mouth of such a fellow. Do take care not to leave your room in the Gostanitsa during the night. There are creatures out there. After checking how much vodka the client had drank, my grandfather asks him what he means. And after a little hesitation and a request not for him to talk about this, the client obliges my grandfather. Around the forests, we find huge mounds of droppings with whole skeletons intact of sizes everything between and including wolves to bears. These shit mounds are left by giant snakes that live in the lake. This was the only doubtful part of the story, as a snake usually wouldn't want to venture into the freezing cold lake. Though it would make a great deal of sense for such a creature to reside in burrows underground. Reports of sightings of the creatures are only heard once or twice a year compared to the often seen mounds because, well, human bones too fall under the purview of everything in between. And when a set is found, reports of a missing person from as far as a few towns over are never far behind. But try not to think too much about what I've just told you. Just stay in your room for the night and do have a good night's rest. My grandfather had little trouble not thinking about it as he made his way to his room that night, as it frankly stunk of giant snake shit. So giving the whole silly thing no more thought, he changed into his nightclothes and swung open the room window to let a cool breeze in. He studied the schematics a little longer until he was satisfied that he had figured it out, then got up to extinguish the light to get some sleep. Turning towards his bed in the now dark room, he sees, peeking through the opened window, the head of a huge snake illuminated by pale moonlight, its further tongue flicking up and down. As any sane man would do, he ran into the closet and shut the door behind him. For not more than 20 seconds he heard the most infernal thrashing of wood against wood and leathery flesh, and of papers and bed covers being whipped about at breakneck speeds. That small time felt like an eternity, as did the minute or so until he heard a rapping on his room's door and a man's voice. "What the hell is going on in there? You've woken everybody up and I've called the police." My grandfather rushed out of the closet, through the wrecked room, and out into the hallway, slamming the door behind him. He gets accosted by the owner until the police arrive, who inspect the room, or what was left of it. Papers are all about, the furniture reduced to splinters, and the bed covers were nowhere in sight. My grandfather collected his few remaining things and, as per police's orders, was given a different room for the night. One of them stepped aside to talk to my grandfather. "Don't open your window again. We don't want to come back here again tonight to recover a body or worse." Rest of the trip went uneventfully. My grandfather fixed the problem and promptly returned to Ukraine, where he and my father, then in his early youth, lived. But my grandfather did bring one thing back. On a trip to the Museum of Natural History, he brought it in between the pages of a book, meaning it was probably a scale. My grandfather showed it to the curator, who shows great interest in it. My grandfather relates the story of how he got it as the curator inspects excitedly. The curator asks if he can hang on to it to conduct some research and ensures my grandfather that he'll show him his findings. My grandfather accepts and parts with the thing. But the curator never did get back to him. But my grandfather did get back to the curator after having some difficulty finding him. The curator responded almost angrily to being questioned about the item and his research on it. "That thing you brought me was a hoax and nothing more. I've decided I want nothing to do with the damned fake, and I suggest you decide the same." And that concludes the story. Now, the strangest thing about this story, at least to me, is that before hearing it, I had heard of all sorts of strange goings-ons in and around Lake Baikal, but never of anything like this. The only thing relatively close was a single isolated mention of a possibility of a Nessie-style plesiosaur-type thing entering the ecosystem through one of the 330 rivers feeding the lake, since one of those things could possibly be mistaken as a giant snake. But there's just about nothing else. Quite the peculiar affair, isn't it? What's hiding or being hidden at Lake Baikal?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.